Hello everybody, Eric again. Like and subscribe. Here we go. Let's read about Anne Ladies of the Club. Anne Ladies of the Club is a 1982 novel written by Helen Hooven Santmeyer about a group of women in the fictional town of Waynesboro, Ohio, who began a women's literary club, which evolves through the years into a significant community service organization in the town. The novel, which looks at the club as it changes throughout the years, spans decades in the lives of the women involved in the club. Between 1868 and 1932, many characters are introduced in the course of the novel, but the primary characters are Anne Gordon and Sally Rusk, who in 1968 are new graduates of the Waynesboro Female College. They each marry soon after the opening of the book, and the decades that follow chronicle their marriages and those of their children and grandchildren. Santmeyer focuses not just on the lives of the women in the club, but also their families, friends, politics, and developments in their small town and the larger world. Synopsis. On the day of their graduation from the Waynesboro Female College in 1868, best friends Anne Alexander and Sally Cottrell are invited along with several of the college's female teachers by Mrs. Lowry, who along with her professor husband operates the college, to become founding members of a new local society, the Waynesboro Women's Club. The club is intended to promote culture and literature among the educated citizens of the Ohio town, while avoiding controversial subjects such as women's suffrage and other reform movements. Socially ambitious Sally agrees to join because she believes the club might become important in the town and wants to establish herself as a serious-minded member of adult society. Introspective Anne, the class valedictorian, joins in order to support Sally. Other early members of the club include Miss Louisa Tucker, a beautiful but cold mathematics teacher, who later marries the commencement speaker, General Deming, scholarly Amanda Reed, who overcame a poor background to earn a degree from Oberlin, and has returned to teach at the female college. Miss Agatha Penny, an elderly teacher whose sciatica leads to a secret induction to the Ludenum. She is prescribed. Mary Thomasina and Eliza Ballard, the wife and daughters of a prominent local judge, and the Mrs. Gardner, two reclusive spinsters, whose nephew Douglas attends Princeton and becomes a local attorney and judge. The club's membership grows over time to include the daughters, granddaughters, and other relatives of the early members, and other society women, particularly the wives of the town's numerous and often changing Protestant ministers. Although the club itself is framed as non-controversial, club meetings and social events sponsored by its members often lead to discussions and conflicts stemming from the widely varying social and political views of the members and their families on subjects such as race, class, ethnic, and religious basis, women's rights, labor reform, and the morality of drinking alcohol, attending the theater, and celebrating Christmas. Anne, the daughter of a doctor, is in love with Dr. John Doc Gordon, her father's protege, and a friend of her late brother Rob, who was killed in the Civil War. Depressed by his war experiences, John gave up his medical practice for several years. With Anne's encouragement resumes his practice, and the two marry. Anne's father consents to the match, but warns her that John is too affected by the suffering he sees as a doctor, and that he is likely to make a poor husband. So Anne will have to be very tolerant. Sally develops a relationship with John's friend, Captain Ludwig Rusk, who has brought a small local rope-making business and begun building it into a large, updated factory. Although Ludwig is a German immigrant, his ambitions match Sally's and her banker father, approving of his work ethic. and Prospects agrees to their marriage. Thomasina Ballard also makes an unexpected marriage to a church organist as a result of a wedding poem she wrote for Anne. Over the years, Anne and Sally continue their club activities while raising families. Anne and John have a son, Johnny, and a daughter, Binny. Sally and Ludwig have a daughter, Elsa, and several sons. Although John is an intelligent and caring doctor, he is secretly unfaithful to Anne, as a way of relieving the pressure of his past war memories and current responsibilities. Anne eventually finds out and suspects that John has ever fathered a child with his cousin, Josephine Stevens, in New Orleans. Although deeply hurt by John's behavior, Anne, remembering her father's advice, chooses to overlook it, and even welcomes Josephine and her son when they later move to Waynesboro. Meanwhile, Ludwig becomes a successful industrialist, and Sally a prominent local hostess, later taking over the presidency of the club. Ludwig hires Eliza Ballard as his secretary after she is forced to leave her previous position in her late father's former law firm due to gossiping about partner Doug Gardner's romance with an Irish Catholic girl, whom he later marries. Despite Eliza's gossip and sharp tongue occasionally causing trouble in the town, she shows a softer side by caring for Arena McCann, a terminally ill young girl who ran away from her oppressively religious parents. Miss Penny's London abduction eventually becomes public knowledge after she appears increasingly disheveled and unable to control her primary school class. At the instigation of Louisa Deming, Miss Penny is forced to retire on a small pension, and her laudanum supply is cut off. Embarrassed and suffering severe withdrawal, she dies of a heart attack while trying to burn herself to death. Elsa secretly loves her childhood friend Johnny, but Johnny falls in love with the Deming's daughter Julia, who, like her mother, is beautiful but cold. Julia is more affectionate towards Johnny's younger sister Benny, who is dazzled by Julia's beauty. Benny gathers violets on a cold, damp morning to make Julia a May basket, and is rewarded by a kiss from Julia, but the dampness brings on an attack of rheumatic fever, and Benny dies. Johnny and Julia marry and have a son, Tucker, while Elsa marries Geb Evans and has a daughter, Jennifer, who becomes Tucker's close friend. Shortly after the turn of the century, Anne is widowed when John has an accident rushing to help a patient in bad weather and subsequently dies of pneumonia. Julia's fragility causes Johnny to have an affair with an Irish Catholic nurse, Nora O'Neill. Through Johnny, Nora's younger sister Ellen meets Ludwig and Sally's youngest son, Paul. Ellen and Paul have a secret romance, and Ellen becomes pregnant, resulting in Paul quietly marrying her with Ludwig's consent since he is underage. Although Paul and Ellen are happy, Sally disapproves of the marriage, cuts ties with her son, and, in response to a barbed remark by Julia's mother Louisa, informs her about Johnny's affair with Nora. As a result, Julia divorces Johnny, moves to California with Tucker, and later marries a wealthy older man who is past the age of having sex. Johnny, suffering from heart disease and the strain of the divorce, soon dies. Anne and the other members of the club are unaware that Sally was the one who revealed Johnny's affair to Louisa, and instead think Eliza spread the story. Sally eventually is reconciled with Paul after he and his family survive a devastating flood. Ludwig dies, and his daughter Elsa takes over as president of the family-owned bank. She also succeeds her mother as president of the club. Elsa's son Ludwig takes control of his grandfather's company after returning from his service in the Great War, where he was gassed. Tucker, separated from Jennifer by his parents' divorce, meets her again as an adult when they are both serving in France in the war. He as a medical corpsman, and she as a nurse. After the war, they marry, and Tucker becomes a doctor and returns to take up his practice in Waynesboro. By the 1930s, Sally is suffering from arteriosclerosis and asks Elsa to bring Anne so that she can confess to Anne that she was the one who revealed Johnny's affair. Elsa talks her out of doing so, noting that Anne is happy with the company of Tucker, Jennifer, and their children. As a result, Sally has a farewell visit with Anne, but does not mention the situation involving Johnny. Sally dies soon afterwards, in 1932, right after Franklin D. Roosevelt is elected president. And the last surviving founding member of the club dies, and the club commemorates the end of an era. Characters. Due to the length of the book and its large number of characters, this list is selected. Donates a minor character. Gordon/Deming/Stevens family. Anne Alexander Gordon, valedictorian of her 1868 graduating class at Waynesboro Female College. She marries Dr. John Gordon and encourages him to resume practice medicine, although hurt by his occasional infidelities. She chooses to overlook them out of love. In 1932, she becomes the last founding member of the club to die. Dr. John Doc Gordon, a medical doctor trained by Anne's father. He is hunted by his bad experiences treating casualties in the Civil War and has trouble dealing with the suffering of his patients, which he internalizes. Despite his difficulties, he is a competent and compassionate doctor and is especially sensitive to the plight of some of his female patients who have married into bad situations. He loves and marries Anne, who secretly commits adultery with various women as a momentary escape from the pressure of his work in marriage. Dr. Alexander, Anne's father, and John Gordon's medical mentor, a widower, he becomes a secret laudanum addict due to pain with rheumatism and eventually dies of a heart attack. Kate Gordon, John's older sister, an eccentric woman who lives independently and operates her own farm. It is implied that she may be a lesbian, as she has a habit of taking in local farm girls for help and companionship, then becoming angry and making a scene when the girls take an interest in local young men. She commits suicide shortly after Anne and John are married. Johnny Gordon Jr., Anne and John's oldest child. He inspires to be, and eventually becomes a doctor like his father. He marries Julia Deming, but is unfaithful to her because she is for grad and does not like sex, and the marriage ends unhappily after she learns he had an affair. Belinda Benny Gordon, Anne and John's younger child. She has a crush on the older Julia Deming, which Julia seems to be reciprocate. She is seen by her father as being similar to his deceased sister Kate as a child. She dies in her early teens from complications of rheumatic fever. Louisa Tucker Deming, a mathematics teacher at the college at the time of the club's founding. She is beautiful, but also cold and insensitive to the needs of others. Originally from Boston, she regarded Waynesboro as an uncivilized place when she first arrived. She marries General Deming, a former brigadier general who became the local congressional representative and has a daughter, Julia. General Deming, a former brigadier general in the Civil War. He is Waynesboro elected representative in Congress. He speaks at Anne Alexander and Sally Kilcratch's graduation from the Female Academy, and later marries their teacher, Louisa Tucker. He later is forced to leave office due to his involvement in the Credit Mobilier bribery scandal of 1872. Julia Deming Gordon, the daughter of General Deming and his wife, Louisa. She is beautiful and cold, like her mother, Louisa, although she enjoys having both men and women admire her beauty. She is not interested in having sex with men. She aspires to a wealthy lifestyle, which she archives after her divorce from Johnny by marrying a much older rich man. She is possibly a repressed lesbian, as shown by her affectionate behavior towards Benny Gordon, including kissing Benny on the mouth. Alexander Tucker Gordon, the son and only child of Johnny and Julia Gordon. He is estranged from his father, Johnny, and grandmother, Anne. After his parents' divorce, he eventually serves in World War I, returns to Waynesboro, marries Jennifer Evans, and becomes a doctor. Jasmine Stevens Edwards, John Gordon's cousin from New Orleans. She is married after the Civil War to an alcoholic husband, with whom she has a son, Rodney. However, Anne suspects that Rodney is actually John's child, conceived when John went to visit his cousin after the death of Jasmine's husband. She brings her son Rodney to Waynesboro to get him out of the unhealthy climate of New Orleans. Much later, she marries widower Sheldon Edwards. Wani Stevens, the son of Jessamine Stevens, possibly fathered by John Gordon. Wani becomes a doctor in Waynesboro and marries Lavinia Gardner. Theresa Stevens, the daughter of Wani and Lavinia Stevens. She writes a historical novel based on Captain Bodian's life. Washk, Seth Evans' family. Sarah Sally Cockrush Washk, Anne's best friend and classmate. She is the daughter of the local bank president and wants to establish herself in the Society of Waynesboro. She is a founding member of the club and eventually serves for many years as club president. She marries Ludwig Washk, who becomes a successful local industrialist, providing Sally with the money and lifestyle to be a prominent local hostess. Ludwig Washk, born in Germany, he later immigrated to the United States and served in the Civil War with John Gordon. He successfully built a small local rope-making company into a large factory called the Washk Cordage Company. He courts and marries Sally, who is both pretty and with her family money and social connections, an asset to him in his business career. He is also politically active in the local Republican Party. Mr. and Mrs. Cochran. Sally's parents. Her father owns the local bank. Elsa Washk Evans, Sally and Ludwig's oldest child and only daughter. Although she is primarily a housewife and mother, her father recognizes that she has a better head for business than her brothers, and she takes over as head of the family-owned bank after he dies. She is in love with her childhood friend, Johnny Gordon, but he falls in love with Julia Deming. So Elsa marries Gib Evans, who had long been in love with her. Gilbert Gib Evans, Elsa's childhood friend and eventual husband, the nephew of the local Baptist minister. He works as a traveling salesman for his father-in-law, Ludwig Washk. Mrs. Gwen Evans, Gib's aunt, the wife of the local Baptist minister, Jennifer Evans Gordon, daughter of Elsa and Gib Evans. She serves as a nurse in Europe in World War I, and eventually marries her childhood friend, Tucker Gordon, thus uniting the Gordon and Washk families. Ludwig Evans, son of Elsa and Gib Evans, he serves in World War I, then takes over the operation of his grandfather, Ludwig Washk's factory. He marries Melissa Patton. Ludwig Washk Jr., Sally and Ludwig's spendthrift son, who, despite his unresponsibility, redeems himself somewhat by serving in World War I before his death. Paul Washk, the younger child and Sally's favorite. He falls in love with Ellen O'Neill, a young Irish Catholic girl, and gets her pregnant while both are underage, leading to a quick marriage. This leads to a family crisis, as his father approves of the marriage, but his mother does not, and briefly estranges herself from Paul. Ballard's Travers family. Judge Thomas Ballard, a reform-minded state Supreme Court judge who later resigns and returns to legal practice in Waynesboro. When the club is formed, he is the richest and most prominent man in town. He is active in local Republican Party politics, but conflicts with other local members of the party over his support for Horace Greeley in the 1872 presidential election. Mrs. Mary Grimes Ballard, the activist wife of Judge Ballard. She supports various causes that are considered radical, including women's suffrage and the temperance movement. She becomes the first president of the club. Eliza Ballard, the older daughter of Judge Ballard, she never marries and supports herself first by working as a secretary in her father's law firm. After her father's death, due to her conflict with Douglas Gardner, a principal of the firm, she is hired as secretary by Ludwig Washk and competently works for him for many years until her death. She is blunt and also a busybody and gossip, which sometimes stirs up trouble in the town. She upsets Doug by gossiping about his romantic interest in Barbara Bodian, and is wrongly suspected of being the person who revealed Johnny Gordon's affair to his wife Julia, causing their divorce. Despite her brusque nature, Eliza is kind to Irena McCann, taking her in and caring for her when she is ill and has no place else to go. Thomasina Ballard Travers, the well-educated but timid, sicky, and romantic daughter of Judge Ballard. She unexpectedly marries church organist Samuel Travers, despite his being relatively poor. Samuel Travers, a local church organist and music teacher who marries Thomasina, although he is at first thought to have married her. for the money. For her money. The two remained happily married for many years until her death. Bye for now.